Welcome, everybody, to another fantastic episode of the Team Lead Talks podcast. I am your host, Andrew Becker, out of Alexandria, Virginia. On today's show, my good new friend that I've come to meet and form a relationship recently, Josh Ries. He is the managing broker of my real estate company in South Dakota. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, Josh, let's jump right into this, dude. What does my real estate company do? How did you get into real estate? Give us the high level, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper here.
Okay, so I've been in real estate about 10 years. I've only been with my real estate company now for about 4.5 months.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was with a traditional franchise brokerage. Over the last couple of years, I've started doing some lead generation consulting and stuff like that. And so through some connections I made outside of the actual brokerage, I got in contact with one of the co-founders at my real estate company. And they basically reached out and said, hey, are you interested in opening up South Dakota? So we are a startup brokerage. The company's only been around since 24. We're in 8 states right now. South Dakota and Texas are the most recent ones. So they brought me on and basically said, open the state. So
cool. Very minimal direction, just open the entire state of North Dakota or South Dakota, right?
South Dakota, yeah.
Cool, dude. All right, yeah. Well, let's dive into what was your experience before? Like, how they didn't just out of the blue call you and say, "Hey, Josh, we want you to open up South Dakota." So let's talk about your experience, which led to that conversation, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to, where it really started at 13 years old, I had an aunt who was an entrepreneur and taught me how to run Google Ads. And that put me on this path with digital marketing, ads, and lead generation. And then I did that for a long, long time. About 10 years ago, my wife was in real estate and she was getting really busy and said, hey, would you get your license and help me? And I was like, I've got another thing going. I don't really, have any desire to. But I did. I got my real estate license and it was one of the best decisions ever because about 2 years later, life happened and I jumped into real estate with both feet. We started a team and I started basically doing all the lead generation stuff because of my background that I had. So we did that for a couple years. We won a bunch of brokerage awards, but we didn't make a lot of money and we're like, what the heck is going on? So we kind of ripped apart our systems, rebuilt everything, actually built a profitable real estate business. And then about 3 years ago, we were in the Portland metro market in Oregon. And then 3 years ago, we relocated to South Dakota. Was all gung-ho. I got to South Dakota, got my broker's license. I was going to start a team. I was going to do exactly what we did in Oregon. And about 3 months into it, I'm like, no, I'm not doing this again.
Don't want to.
One time was enough. My wife still runs the team in Oregon to this day.
From South Dakota?
From South Dakota.
Okay.
So, which that could be a topic for a whole nother podcast on how we figured that one out.
Yeah.
But basically joined a brokerage here, kind of was in the background of some different teams doing some lead generation consulting. I sold like 5 homes in South Dakota. That was really it. And then I wrote a book just a couple years ago and that got some exposure. I ended up getting invited to go on to Jimmy Burgess's podcast. And that led to me getting invited to write for Inman Magazine. And so over the last 2 years, I've really been doing a lot more consulting and writing in the lead generation space for real estate teams and brokerages. And then that's kind of what connected me with the co-founders at my real estate company.
Awesome, man. Yeah, dude, real quick side, that would be an interesting topic with you and or with your wife about how you run a team in a completely different state from South Dakota. So maybe after this episode, we can chat about scheduling that one too.
So she would love it, I think.
Yeah. So more to come on that later.
Yeah.
For those of you listening now, there's a future episode that just got scheduled that we are excited to talk about. But let's go back to my real estate company. This is a brand new brokerage. What is your role? I know you're bringing that brokerage to the state of South Dakota, but I'm imagining there's a lot more than just recruiting. Like, what's your role there in this new startup?
So really, I'm doing all the recruitment ads, lead generation ads for the company as well. So, our whole vision with the company, when they first approached me, I told them to pound sand. I wasn't interested. We get calls from recruiters all the time. Did some research on the company and just couldn't get it out of my head. One of the things that really resonated with me is they were just talking about, the whole goal was to make a brokerage that was for the agents, The goal is to never go public. It's always to be agent first. And a lot of it is we really feel the industry is broken. And unfortunately, there's too many external things that have got into the real estate industry that are affecting agents. So our whole goal as a brokerage is to really limit all that and really allow agents to run profitable businesses and be successful, because we just feel that the 80% failure rate in the industry is part of the reason that the industry is struggling. So the whole goal is really to invest in our agents and actually teach them the business behind the business so that they can be profitable, and not just a lot of the other brokerages chasing vanity metrics and all that type of stuff.
Let's dive deep into that part of it, Josh. Like, what are you tactically doing at that level to ensure profit margin is where it needs to be? Because I too have seen and talked to and, firsthand discovered like all these teams, all these agents out there, oh, I'm selling 500 homes a year, I'm doing 200 million in volume. And they're like, cool, what's your profit margin? And they're like, I'm not making any money. And you're like, oh, cool, awesome. Not a feasible business, but cool, you're doing all this stuff. So what's the difference at my real estate company? Like, how do you come into that brokerage and really turn it from like, I might be doing a lot of business, but I'm not keeping a lot of money, to the exact opposite?
Yeah, so it's really a process of just refining. A lot of it is your KPIs on what you're tracking, and then giving agents a true understanding of where their profit really lies. And so we kind of focus on 3 metrics that we really drive home with our agents. And it's your cost per lead, your cost per acquisition or cost per closing, and then lastly, your lifetime value. And what we found is if you kind of optimize in that order, and this was something that I learned, I mentioned it before, like with our own personal business, when we had this realization, we were selling homes but not making any money. I had to dig back into like, let's get out of real estate for a little bit and get into like the business world and really look at things. And that was what we did, is we really optimized for, your cost per lead to get that as reasonable as possible. And then your cost per acquisition. And the easiest way I like to explain that is, how much does it cost you once you get them into your ecosystem of lead generation, into your funnels? What does it cost you to get them to the closing table? And then ultimately lifetime value. And that's really kind of a retention metric. And then, because that's going to be your multiplier, because every subsequent transaction you can do with the same person or the same client becomes more profitable.
Yeah.
And so those are really kind of the 3 metrics that we focus on teaching agents how to really understand those, and within those, how to optimize for each of those in everybody's business. So that's a big part of it. And a lot of it too that we are teaching people is it's not just money wise, because we have some agents that they're not spending any money on leads, but it's okay. How do you optimize your business with your time as your leverage piece to be more efficient with those steps, even if you're not paying for leads?
Cool, dude. Let's talk about these 3 KPIs. When we spoke before, I'm very process, systems oriented, data and analytics kind of guy myself. Let's dive into each one. Can you tell us what the KPI is and then define it? And then how do you recommend to all your agents coming on board that they're actually, because knowing about cost per acquisition or cost per lead is one thing, but collecting that information in a very systematic way as well is super important, or else it doesn't matter, right? So how do you get that ball rolling? Can you talk to each one individually and define it so we know, so there's no confusion about what each of them means?
Absolutely. So cost per lead for us is just, how much does it cost for you? And like I said before, it's not just money, it's also your time. If you're doing a lot of organic social media and stuff, but what does it cost you to actually get somebody into the top of your lead generation funnel? Okay. So if that's, pay-per-click, a lot of the time, you're looking at a cost per lead of, $15 to $20 in that range. But if you're using it, like in a time essence, how many social media posts do you need to make to get one person into your lead generation funnel? And when I say that, I tell people like, this has to be a real person. This isn't just a name and a phone number. This is someone you've actually talked to, that there's a potential for you to do business with. Because that's another thing. I think a lot of time lead generation companies talk leads, but we don't define what a lead is. And I think a lead is somebody who comes into your ecosystem that you have the potential to do a deal with down the road, not just a name and a phone number. So what does it cost you to get people top of funnel in that lead generation ecosystem? One thing we found, one of the biggest drivers of that to make that the most efficient process possible, is relevance. Mm-hmm. So on your Google ad campaigns, are your campaigns relevant to the specific pain point that you're trying to solve in that specific situation? Are your follow-ups when you reach out to these clients that came through that lead generation funnel, is your follow-up relevant to the reason?
Mm-hmm.
I think all too often in real estate, we get ourselves in a situation where, we'll run a homes for sale, obviously targeting buyer leads. And the first thing we ask them is, do you have a home to sell too?
Yeah.
And it's like, there's relevance. One thing we found is leads are lost between the steps of your funnel. And so the relevance is the one thing that keeps it, that process optimized. And so that's a big part for us at the cost per lead level. It's really relevance based, being relevant within your, follow-up systems and everything to why they actually came into your funnel. So is that good for
mathematically though, Josh, how are you, because you mentioned kind of two things, like cost per, if you're running a marketing campaign, i.e. like a PPC, like pay-per-click kind of thing, but also your time. So how, if I'm coming into you saying, hey, I'm running this ad, I have 100 leads, how are you calculating the cost per lead?
So it's really just your ad spend, how much you spend on ads by how many ads or leads you got in. And once again, defining what a lead is in your business, I think is really important. So you can do this math. But if you spend $100, you get 10 leads, you're at $10 per lead. The time is a little more difficult because really you have to look at it from a standpoint of, how long if you did 10 social media posts and you got one lead, how much time were each of those posts? And then, taking that back to, okay, it took me 2 hours to get one lead into my database. And so that would be kind of how I would run the math. And the time one's a little difficult because let's face it, like we don't sit there with a stopwatch while we're doing activities, right? So that one you kind of have to estimate a little bit on, but with the money wise, it's a little easier when you're doing like paid ads. Like for example, a lot of people are doing Zillow. And they're paying, $10,000 a month for a zip code in Zillow, and they're getting 4 leads, a month, and it's like $2,500 a lead. Now, the interesting thing there is I would make the argument that some of your Zillow leads that you're getting don't actually fall into how you define a lead. Sure. So a lot of times I talk to people that are doing it and they're like, oh yeah, I pay $10,000, so I got 4. Well, at $2,500 a lead. And it's like, but really 2 of them weren't even how you define a lead. So really you're at $5,000 a lead now.
That's crazy, man. Okay. So how do you, because it's one thing to define it and then to mathematically equate it, right? But how are you actually collecting this information? And is this something that I'm doing on the back of a napkin? Or is it something that technology is helping me with, or anywhere in between?
Sometimes, back of a napkin works, right? We always tell our agents to try to keep it as simple as possible because a lot of agents, especially in real estate, the more complex you make a system, the less likely they are to actually utilize it. The cool thing is, like at my real estate company, we have Follow Up Boss and we also have Luxury Presence. They have really good tracking stuff on the back end. So for our agents that are doing like paid ads and stuff like that, it makes it pretty easy to track all that. But, I'm a firm believer that you can run a very profitable real estate brokerage with a cell phone and a spreadsheet. And so, worst case scenario, just having people really take good notes. I think that's kind of the key to this whole thing is just tracking it. And it doesn't have to be digital. It can be, manually, but writing down like when you get leads into your system, where they came from, keeping notes on those things, because that's really how you're going to optimize your system down.
Very cool. All right. So that's cost per lead. What was the next one, Josh?
So cost per acquisition or cost per closing. And I want to differentiate, in real estate, I look at it a little bit different than the normal business world because cost per acquisition is something a little different. So I like to use cost per closing. And for me, that's, once you get them into your lead generation funnel at the top, what does it cost you to get them down to the closing table? And that was one thing, like in our business, what we found when we ripped everything apart is our cost per lead was through the roof. But then we would get them in our nurture funnel, and to nurture them down, we were paying for all these things. And that's where like the $29.99 or the $200 a month, or, those fees really start to pick up.
Yeah.
The interesting thing in our business, a lot of those things that we were paying for monthly, we weren't even utilizing them to nurture people. So, it's kind of a waste. But
just to clarify, you're talking about like shiny object tools and softwares.
Exactly.
That add up over time. There might be 20, 30, $200, but like if you have 20 of them, that's actually a lot of money. Yeah. Okay.
And, you look at it on your, P&L sheet and you're like, oh, that's no big deal, $20. But especially if you're not closing very many deals, all those costs have to be attached to a closed deal.
Right.
At the end of the day. And so if you're a solo agent and you're closing 1 or 2 a month and your monthly expenses you're looking at, $1,000 a month and you close 2 deals, you have to add that 500 on each of those transactions. It gets a little more convoluted too in real estate because you have such a long time. Like you're going to bring people into the top of the pipeline and they might not buy something for 18 months.
Yeah.
So the easiest way that we tell our agents is, if you want to get just real simple, down and dirty, calculate all your monthly expenses and then divide that by the amount of transactions you're closing every month. It's not perfect, but it gets you pretty close.
Yeah.
And so it's a great way too to look at like, okay, where's that money going? So personally for us, what was happening, like our business, we were doing a lot of Zillow and other third-party lead gen, which that's a whole nother topic because I had this background in lead generation, but when we came into real estate, I thought it was different because that's what people told me. And so I just like threw that all out the window. And so we were like, our cost per lead was right around $2,500 a piece. And then by the time we nurtured them down to the closing table, we were like at like 3,700.
Cost per closing?
Okay. So at the time we were only, our average commission at that time was like 7,500. So
we were almost close to half.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was why I was like, well, no wonder we're not making any money. But until we did that math, we had no idea. And so that's the tricky thing too. And I think the lesson there is like, just understanding your numbers will make you more profitable because you'll realize stuff like, wait a second, where'd this go?
Yeah. One thing I want to also just hit the nail on top of the head here is like what Josh just said of knowing that the cost per lead was, I forgot what you said, but 1,500. Then the cost per closing was 3,700. It's not a one size fits all. Like, don't just say, oh, Josh's cost per closing was 3,700. So that's my benchmark. The idea, you guys, is to say, okay, it's $3,700 now that we actually started benchmarking that. And that's what we're going to start with. So how do we start to bring that down and down and down and down? So if your cost per lead or cost per closing is $5,000 or $1,000, the ultimate goal, regardless of what the number actually is to decrease that number. And you just mentioned something that's super important too, increase the average commission check size coming in as well. That's how you grow real profit margin. But you cannot do that, like Josh just said, if you are just flying blind and you have no clue what to even look for. Because how are you going to improve it if you don't know what to look for in the first place?
Yeah. And I think another big issue within real estate is we like to push one size fits all approaches.
Right.
And that's one thing, over the last 2 years, I've done some lead generation consulting, and one lady, super cool lady, solo agent, her sole goal in life is she wants to sell 4 to 5 homes to take her kids on a really nice vacation, all inclusive every year. Her husband has a very good job. They live off his salary. So that's her only goal.
Yeah.
I've also consulted with a team that their goal is to get to 400 million in volume. Now, the problem with this is these two people have very different lead generation strategies.
Yeah.
But yet a lot of people are like, oh, you just got to do this. You got to do Zillow, you got to do cold calling or whatever. And it's like, they're two very different strategies. And that goes back to even understanding your cost per acquisition and cost per lead. It's not a one size fits all approach. It all has to be based off what are your business goals long term and how do you manipulate those numbers to get there.
Yeah. I always tell people all the time, like in our team, Josh, we were tracking 135 different reports, right, in real time, but we didn't look at 135 reports every single day. It was just the kind to the timing to manipulate the ones that you did need to look for. But at the end of the day, it's just a mathematical equation, right? No matter what your strategy is, the lady or the woman who wanted to close 5 in an entire year versus that team that wants to do 400 million in total volume, you just see what's working, backtrack it and start, because we used to do one of my favorite KPIs was interested leads per closed deal. So I would know we need 10 interested leads to close one deal. We want to do 100 deals, we need 1,000 interested leads. We got 1,000 interested leads, we need 10,000 leads, because 1 in 10 were what we defined as interested. So it's just a mathematical formula. And depending on your 5 deals a year or 500 deals a year, just look at it and say, hey, what's been working and what's been not working? So let's just do more of what, the former.
Yeah. And I think all too often we try to way overcomplicate real estate. I mean, there's only 2 ways to make more money. It's either sell more homes or sell the same amount of homes more efficiently.
More expensive. Yeah.
That's Well, and I guess technically there's three ways: more expensive homes, or more homes, or the same amount more efficiently. And that's all it is. And like you said, the interesting thing, going back to that interested leads per closing, right? As a team leader, that's a huge metric too, because that also helps you with scaling, how many more team people, because then you can look at how many of my interested leads does it take per team member?
Yeah.
And then you can say, hey, if I want to ramp up to 1,000, how many more team members do I need to come in? It's just all math and looking at, the law of numbers is always going to be there.
Yeah, dude, I used to love looking at that stuff because we would track by lead source, like how much volume, the average, and the count. But then we also track that for our team members as well. And then we'd marry up the team members that were better at the better lead sources and figure it was just fun to me, like that level of operation. But again, it goes back to being able to have that information for you to actually look at. So Josh, I know we're kind of over time right here, but let's circle back to our conversation around the three: cost, average lifetime value. Can you explain what that is and how to calculate that?
Yeah, so lifetime value, once again, is a little different. I look at it a little different in real estate. And to me, you just look at what's your average commission, and then the number of transactions that you can get out of each one of your clients. And it's a little tough, especially if you're newer, because let's face it, you don't have repeat clients.
Yeah.
The client life cycle in real estate is, I think most recently they said 12 to 15 years or something like that. So it takes time for a new agent to get this, but ultimately it's, if you optimize for the first two, the last one, your client lifetime value is just a multiplier, because if you can do more deals with that one person, it now makes your cost per lead and cost per acquisition lower because you're closing more deals with them. And so to me, that's just a multiplier, and it's looking at how many deals do you get out of each one of the people within your database, past clients and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, very cool.
And then to make that, to optimize it, it's just a retention play. What do we need to do to stay top of mind with people more often? How do we position ourselves so that when they think real estate, we come to mind, and that type of stuff. So that's more of an, SOI nurture type thing of, just staying top of mind. But it's really a good driver once you've been in the industry for a while and you have your top two kind of nailed in. That third one is what's going to multiply your business, especially when you start a team, because now you've got multiple people working for you. So you're just cranking.
Yeah, I love that, dude. And said a different way, and how I used to think of that was you're cranking and you're paying. We used to do PPC, probates, like that kind of stuff that we're paying for, right? So that expense, that capital is going out the door. All the SOI, the nurturing, the lifetime value, however you want to categorize it, helps offset some of the costs. So the more this side built up, you're still spending maybe 10, 15K on marketing outbound initiatives to get direct response in there. But the more this side of SOI, referrals, people saying, I just worked with Josh, like my sister wants to buy a house now, that just helps to offset that. Because in essence, it's almost not free, but it's kind of like a free lead if you can convert it and close it.
They're definitely your most profitable leads,
100%, yeah. So keep that in mind. So we'll summarize here, Josh. So we talked about cost per lead, cost per acquisition slash closing, like how much does it actually cost to get it to revenue, and then lifetime value of a customer, meaning, if I'm your client, I do one deal with you this year, can you get me, 2 years from now when I want to size up my house or move up to a bigger house or downsize, whatever that might be. So so you track those three things, and then what are you guys teaching, if you can, and real quick, like how are you teaching to optimize that? Because one thing, it's hard to track period sometimes, but then, you're looking at this, and then what tactical action items are you like, okay, here's how we're going to start to bring your costs per closing down?
Yeah. A lot of it starts, to be honest with you, before you do, and it's defining your target audience and knowing who you're speaking to. And then a lot of it is just like refining your follow-up process to help those three metrics. Mm-hmm. So, your better follow-up is going to, like, cost per lead. If you pull a lead in your system and they never get to the closing table, that's a real expensive lead. And so, really refining your follow-up and your nurture processes. I'm huge on like person-to-person contact. And I know we're starting to shift a lot to AI, but one thing we've been seeing is a lot, especially the teams that are over relying on AI, they're seeing their conversion rates drop. So, a lot of what we're doing is teaching a little bit different way of nurturing clients using social media, using a lot of video, personal touches, that type of stuff, because that's what's going to make you more profitable and really allow you to, really optimize for those 3 metrics.
Yeah.
So that's the short version, since we're running out of time.
Well said, dude. Yeah, we could have a whole nother podcast episode, you and me, about what you just said, though, about AI. I also thank AI for the prospect to client conversion is going to ultimately hurt people rather than help, even though, yeah, it's cool. We have Mandy, the appointment setter. She works 365, 24/7, but then you don't feel that personal touch, which I think real estate is in today's world. So I think, I don't have a crystal ball. I've said this a lot on this podcast, but I think it's going to wind up hurting people who are like, get rid of our whole department of appointment setters, because we're going to, have this one employee who can set 50 appointments a day and everyone is great. But I think it's going to be that lack of personal touch. It's going to hurt the conversion rate. And Josh, I think just like text messaging used to be the big thing, right? Like 50,000 text messages a day to a cold list. I think the federal government sometime in the very near future is going to have you disclose, hey, Josh, welcome to the Andrew Becker team. You are talking to an AI robot, or some sort of disclaimer, and they're going to go click, because I don't want to talk to a robot. I always say real estate, attorneys, and medical, I think, need to shy away from the AI appointment setting robot stuff. But that's just me. Yeah. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I agree. And the thing is, statistically speaking, when you look at teams and conversion rates, one of the hardest thing with a team that's doing marketing is that handoff from the top of the funnel when someone comes in, because normally it's the team leader that's the face of the team, right? And then they book a listing appointment and someone else that's not that team leader shows up to do the appointment. So we've already proven statistically that is one of the places where conversion rates go down. Now we've made it more difficult, because now we've introduced a robot to start the whole process. And then you do the hand. So I totally agree.
You gave me PTSD, dude, of setting appointments, and then me or my business partner who had our name on the team name of, Jeremy, you came, where's Andrew or Dan? And then that was hard enough. But imagine Rebecca the robot, right?
Yeah. Where's she at?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think my biggest advice is use AI to take away all the daily tasks that you do repetitively every day to free yourself up to do the person-to-person stuff. Because I agree with you, the real estate, we're never going to get away from that person-to-person interaction. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So we share in that same, foreshadowing of what's to come with these AI voice bots. But if you're having success with it, to each his own, right, Josh? So continue doing what you do. That's just
if it works and it's profitable, go for it.
Yeah. All right, Josh, I would ordinarily ask one follow-up question around sharing something, but we've kind of hit our limit. I know you're a super busy dude. Would love to have you back on with your wife or separately to continue that conversation, because I think there's a lot of topics that we sort of touched on here that we didn't get to dive really deep into. But thank you so much for your time today, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate it too. It's been a blast.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
See you later.
Bye-bye.